Hello and welcome to all the Hylians out there. I'm Joe. This time I'm flying solo for a return to Hyrule in Focus. This time to Ocarina of Time rather than our continued analysis of A Link to the Past, which we do plan to continue soon. That said, with us having diverted to discussing Tears of the Kingdom, this time we decided to return to a classic Ocarina of Time video that we're kind of known for. Namely, this time we're not going to be discussing Malon and how she's perfect for Link, or how Saria is essentially Link's mommy figure, but rather we're going to be discussing Zelda herself, the princess who tends to give her name to the series. Namely, the most controversial choice this Zelda ends up making at the end of Ocarina of Time. A choice that, honestly, I've seen criticized time and time again as one that was cruel to Link, if inadvertently so. And while I do tend to agree that there was perhaps some hurt feelings on Link's part, I don't think that was ever Zelda's intent. And kudos to the fan base, for the most part, that they've noticed this and tend to give Zelda a bit of leeway. Some don't, but most do. I kind of fall into the camp that says, let's show some consideration for Zelda and actually think about why she did what she did and why she might have assumed it wasn't such a bad choice. Zelda, after the battle with Ganon, and after he has been sealed, decides to send Link back to the past. This decision has massive repercussions. Namely, it splits the timeline in three. Something that, honestly, Zelda could not have known would happen. And the reason for this is that while she might have some sort of gift for knowing the future in some capacity, as in rather the mold of Galadriel or Finrod Felagund from Tolkien's Legendarium, I don't think she could predict a split in the timeline, as this is the sort of freak accident that, well, defies fate. In her case, her intent was to send Link to the past to fix the kingdom. The thing is, though, she would not have been able to predict that there was a split. Likely, she assumed that her timeline would disappear, and that with it, she might vanish one day to the next into the timeline that would be taking its place. That is to say, she wouldn't have no recollection, she wouldn't know about what happened in the reality where Ganon won, because that reality wouldn't exist. She was riding with the theory, not of the multiverse, but of a linear type of history, where what would follow is a rather peaceful life. Doubtless she assumed that she'd probably enjoy the life of an ordinary princess, and Link would continue on with his childhood. Likely, she probably hoped he might remain her friend, but also might enjoy some more time with the Kokiri, likely assuming that he might get to spend some more time with his mom, Saria, or that he might join her in the castle as a playmate in some capacity, sneaking in and probably helping her out. It's without a doubt that this Zelda is perhaps one of the fondest of Link in the entirety of the timeline. In some Zelda games, Zelda barely knows Link, as in the case of Twilight Princess. In others, like Skyward Sword, she's perhaps the one who knows him best. In the case of Ocarina of Time, she knows him fairly well, and likely felt that it might be best and most healing for him to enjoy a regular childhood, and maybe in time, and time is what I put emphasis on, he might recover from what traumas he's been made to endure in the adult timeline. And this is where we get to the tragic part of her decision. That which had the most dire effects on the timeline. It in reality didn't go exactly as she likely planned for it. Rather, what happened was that the timeline split into a trio of timelines. One where Link wasn't present to stop Ganon, and the sages had to seal him, Ganon somehow, who, having been weakened from the fight, cast into the Sacred Realm. There's another timeline where Link triumphed and was sent back in time, the one Princess Zelda from the adult timeline would be familiar with. And there was, of course, the child timeline, where all the creepy horror stuff happens, much to my delight. Her decision was one based in love for Link and compassion for him, and likely was her trying to take responsibility for all that had occurred to the people of Hyrule. She was, in all truth and honesty, acting as a princess likely should. Her decision is therefore understandable, and it's rather akin to the decision Mirai Trunks makes by going back in time in Dragon Ball Z. In Zelda's case, she is trying to heal the damage inflicted by Ganon and trying to reclaim the Triforce in a way and put it back together and make it so that Ganon never broke it in three. The trouble with her decision, though, is that because of the power of the Ocarina and the Triforce itself, this causes a fracture in time. Combined with Link's many returns and looping back and forth in time, likely this completely distorted time itself, splitting the river in three. With Zelda, her motivation, we have to look at Zelda as a bit of a martyr. She had lost her mentor, Impa, who was forced to become a sage, and in turn, her people had been made to suffer because she wasn't able to prevent her father from making the foolish decision of trusting Ganon. Likely, there was a sense of responsibility and obligation, along with survivor's guilt, though it was likely very misplaced given that she had no way of stopping Ganondorf. Though a well-trained Sheikah and a powerful mage, Zelda in no way had the tools to fight Ganon. This is why Link was so crucial with the Master Sword and with the Triforce of Courage. So her decision to send him back is one that makes a great deal of sense. And one can even say it's the sort of decision that only a truly compassionate, if naive person would make. To an extent, she could hardly be blamed for making the assumption that the timeline would fix itself. After all, what can mere mortals do before the power of fate and destiny itself? Well, apparently a lot. Her decision is one that I think we should kind of pity in a way, as she would have to kind of live with the decision of sending Link back in time, as it meant that she had to live her whole life alone after that, as her only friends were really Impa, who is a sage and thus pretty much out of contact, and Link. So what can only be surmised is that the remainder of her life would be a terribly lonely affair, one in which she would quite frankly have to endure it as she set to work rebuilding Hyrule, or what was left of it. So what are we to make of her and her decision? As the title says, she might just be the most self-sacrificing Zelda of all times, sacrificing possibly a desire for Link herself, possibly her only friends, in order to do the right thing, so that in a lot of ways she becomes a martyr. And it's this trait that I think she should be most admired for. Yes, I know she's cool when she dresses up like a ninja and does the ninja thing, or when she's blasting Ganon. To be honest, that's not her coolest gesture. Her coolest act has definitely got to be her sending Link back in time, as it means sacrifice. And while we've all criticized her decision in some way at some point, let's be honest, we should also kind of admire it. It's the sort of act only a truly kind person would make. It is, in some ways, given the information she has available to her, a wise decision, as she has no prophetic knowledge of the future. She knows only the past she has lived, can't really predict that the timeline's about to break into a trio. Her only thought is to her people and Link. So I do think there should be some sympathy extended to the poor princess. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I do hope you'll feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Link taking down Volvagia.